Hi class, Mrs. Calvi here. I'm going to do a quick review on adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing positive and negative integers. Okay, so I have a problem here. It's -4 plus -3. So you have to remember when we did these, there were certain rules. The first thing I want to look at here, I'm seeing I have an addition problem. And if you remember, the rules were if the signs were the same, I would add and keep the signs. So for example, I remember I would always say apples and oranges, right? So I'm grouping my fruit. I want my fruit grouped to be the same. So all of my apples can go together, my oranges can go together. My apples and oranges cannot go together. So that means I would have to subtract them if they were different. Well, it just so happens these are the same. So it's as if I'm saying these are apples and these are apples because they have the same sign. They're both negative. So if they're both apples, I can group them together, which means I could add. You just have to remember the rule is when the signs are the same, you're adding and keeping the sign. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to add 4 and 3 to get 7. And we are keeping the sign of negative. So a -4 plus a -3 is equal to a -7. Okay? So remember, if the signs are the same, you're adding and keeping the sign. Apples and apples, add them together, keep the sign. Okay, let's try a different problem. Okay, so let's say I had this problem here, -4 plus -3. So I'm looking at this and I have to remember my rules. If my signs are the same, I'm adding and keeping the sign. If my signs are different, I'm subtracting and taking the sign of the bigger number. Well, I'm looking here. I have a -4 plus 3. I'm going to use this as the sign for my 3. So my signs here, they are different. It's like apples and oranges. I cannot group them together, so I have to take them apart, which means taking them apart or separating them would mean subtracting. So I'm going to subtract the 4 and the 3, which would give me a 1. And then I need to take the sign of the bigger number. Well, 4 is bigger, and the sign that's with my 4 is a negative. So my final answer would be -1. So remember, these signs are not the same. These are apples. These are oranges. You subtract them, take the sign of the bigger number. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, so here I have 12 plus a -5. So I have a +12 and I have a -5. So in this case, my signs are not the same. So I have apples and I have oranges, two different fruits. I'm going to subtract them or separate them apart. So I'm going to take 12 and I'm going to subtract 5 to get 7. And then I need to take the sign of the bigger number. Well, I have a 12 and I have a 5. 12 is larger and the sign that's with my 12 is positive. So my final answer is just going to be a +7. Okay, let's try another one. 6. Well, I'm going to take, I have a -3. This subtraction sign I'm going to put with this 6. So these signs are the same. So this is like having apples and apples. I can add those together and I'm going to add and then keep the sign. So if I add 6 and 3, that would give me 9, and I'm going to keep the sign of negative. So my final answer is a -9. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, here we have 2 minus 10. So our signs are different. We have a +2, and then we're going to put this negative with this 10. So this is like apples and oranges. So apples and oranges cannot go together. We're going to subtract those apart. So we're going to take our 10 and we're going to subtract 2 from it. That would give us 8. And then we have to remember to take the sign of the bigger number. So here is a positive. We're taking this subtraction sign to be with the 10, right? So take the sign of the bigger number. 10 is larger than 2, and the sign that's with the 10 is the negative. So we're going to go ahead and make this final answer a -8. Okay? So many students may look at this and say, oh, 2 minus 10, 8, and forget about the negative sign. You have to remember the rules. If you have $2 and you subtract 10, that's going to give you a negative answer. You don't have 10 to give away, right? You only had 2 to give away. All right, so now let's move on to multiplication and division. The rules for multiplication and division are very simple. Okay, so here we have a -3 times a -4. Now for both multiplication and division, the rules are, if my signs are the same, my answer will be positive. If my signs are different, my answer will be negative. Now, always figure out what your sign is first, because if you do the math first, you're going to forget to put the sign in the end. So here I have a negative and a negative. So my signs are the same. So if my signs are the same, I said that my answer would be positive. So now I know it's going to be positive. Now I just need to multiply 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. My final answer is a positive 12. Okay, so let's see if I change this and I made it -3 times 4. Well, my signs are the same. My answer is positive. If my signs are different, my answer is negative. My sign here for the 3 is negative. My sign for the 4 is positive. So here my signs are different. So my final answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to put my negative sign so I don't forget it. Now I'm going to do the math. 3 times 4 is 12. My final answer is a -12. All right. So same rules for division. So if I had a division problem, so I have -4 divided by -8. My signs are the same. My answer is going to be positive. Now I'm going to do the math. 64 divided by 8 is going to give me a positive 8. Okay, signs are the same. My answer is positive. So if I change this and I made this -64 divided by positive 8, so here my signs are different, right? So if my signs are different, my final answer will be negative. And then I do the math. 64 divided by 8 is 8. My final answer would be -8. So multiplication and division, very simple. Signs are the same, your answer is positive. Signs are different, your answer is negative. Now, when you're doing your problems at home, I would actually write that down and have it in front of you. Positive, signs are the same, your answer is positive. Signs are different, your answer is negative. That's for multiplication and division only, okay? So now also, you may see your division problems possibly written a different way without the division sign. So you may see it written this way, which is also fine. You might have -64 with the fraction bar and 8. Same thing, okay? My signs are different. I know my answer is going to be negative, so I'm going to put my negative sign right away. I'm going to take 64 divided by 8, and that's going to give me an 8. Okay, so you might see division written that way. You also might see the multiplication problems written differently as well, using parentheses. So for example, let's say I had -5 and I was multiplying it by 3. They might not have the multiplication sign. You guys know when there's a number or a numeral outside a set of parentheses, that automatically means multiplication. So I'm going to just follow the rules here. My signs are different. My answer will be negative. And then 5 times 3 is 15, so a final answer of -15. I might have -5 times -3. Okay, so signs are the same. My answer is positive. Then do the math. 5 times 3 is 15. The answer to that one would be positive 15. Okay, I will talk to you soon.